Okay. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar in the series Innovative Public Procurement in Action, Exploring an Instrument for Urban Transformation. Today, we're going to explore the instrument of innovation partnership. Just to say that I'm Beatrice Maria Bellè, and I will be the host for today. I will be moderating the whole session for today's webinar. I'm a postdoc researcher at the design department of Politecnico di Milano, and I am a project manager and working on a EU-funded project, URBREATH, which is about implementing nature-based solution in 9 different European cities and beyond. So just first, some housekeeping for the webinar. So please be muted unless if you want to have some questions or to contribute to the discussion after the presentation. And you can choose to keep your camera on or off. It's up to you. And it's nice also to have some faces during the discussion, so we can see you and to see your reaction also. But at the same time, since the recordings will be, since the session will be recorded, then feel free to do whatever you want, because we will share it afterwards. So the objective of this webinar is to talk about the innovation partnership, and then we can discuss and have exchange about it to learn from each other on how this can be applied. The structure of the webinar is the following. So we will start with an introduction and the context of today's webinar. Then we will have a technical deep dive by Francesco Molinari to understand the instrument. And then we are going to have time to ask questions and to make our best to respond to them. And after that, we are going to have an interactive part to discuss the pros and cons and the relevance of the instrument for the NBS procurement in cities. And we will finish with a summary with final remarks and outlook for the coming session. So before we dive into the instrument of innovation partnership, I just want briefly to introduce our project to be familiar with you with the URBREATH project. So let me just try to share my screen because sometimes I have some issues. So now you cannot see the screen. Perfect. That always happens. So okay. It's not. Let me just try again. Every time I have issues with the presentation mode, I don't know why. So what's the project about? So just a brief overview. So URBREATH is a groundbreaking initiatives and co-funded by the European Union, and will setting the stage for a new era of urban planning. It poised to revolutionize urban landscape and harness for full potential for NBS across diverse climatic zone, and it fostered the community engagement and knowledge sharing. So in this project, we have 4 frontrunner pilot sites. Also, we have 5 different follower cities and pilot sites, and those are somehow included into the process of co-creation. So it's a kind of co-creation based project. And the idea is to develop a nature-based solution implementation with some assistant tools, for example, the digital twin. And URBREATH is also multidisciplinary and it has also an international consortium. So just some hints of the project at glance. So the title of URBREATH is longer and is a systemic integration of transformative technical and nature-based solution to improve climate neutrality of European cities and regions to tackle climate change, and then URBREATH approach. The topic is to demonstrate the climate mitigation and resilience solution in support of the implementation of the adaptation to climate change and cities mission. And the duration of this project is 48 months. So we are somehow running out of the second year of the project. The funding scheme is the Horizon Horizon Europe project, and the budget is almost 15 million euros. And the consortium is organized within 37 different partners organization. So who we are, the coordinator
Just stepping in here. I think most people in this call know URBREATH. I think, even though I don't know Hannah from before, I think you joined when I presented URBREATH earlier. So Beatrice, I think you can just keep it short, the presentation of URBREATH, unless someone else says that you want more information about URBREATH. But otherwise, I think you can move on. Yeah.
Okay. So just be brief, the coordinator is the Lisbon Council, and there are also other different partners such as university, public agency, large enterprises, small and medium enterprises, non-profit organizations and network, and also for sure frontrunner cities and follower cities, which are Madrid, Leuven, Tallinn, Cluj-Napoca, Athens, Parma, Aarhus, Kajaani, and Pilsen. And they are divided into 4 different climate zones: Boreal, Atlantic, Continental, and Mediterranean. The objective of this project is to engage with stakeholders group and living labs based on the local needs and policy, climate, and also related to climate and hazards analysis. There is also to establish the ICT tools and methods of participatory processes, and also to introduce innovative cooperative organizational models to ensure and to secure the project sustainability. Also, we want to assess the quantitative impact assessment of the climate effects towards climate neutrality. We want to develop and demonstrate efficient and effective services models and tools. We would like to enhance synergies effects of intervention towards improved local and urban climate neutrality, and develop and deploy innovative clustering of NBS and hybrid approaches into the different pilot sites. And also we develop an assessment framework for the evidence-based evaluation of the NBS via extensive monitoring and deployed solution. Also, we are working on the replication plans. So we're working on the replication of the URBREATH methodology and tools together with frontrunner and follower cities, but also we want to mentor and coaching the follower cities on these processes. There is also the idea of awareness and dissemination activities to support an adoption of the sustainable URBREATH solution, such as urban regional planning and regeneration, resilience, and climate neutrality, and also to develop novel business models and strategies for regional climate resilience enhancement. So I think that's okay. So the collaborative procurement framework is what we are going to discuss today, and that's the umbrella term for the series of this webinar. So the collaborative procurement for framework for urban NBS is co-creation, participatory design of the NBS solution. It includes citizen, so that they can better take better the ownership, and the public works together with the inhabitants and the citizen, or with the companies, instead of just buying something. Then the procurement implementation, so the innovative approaches, is the preliminary market consultation, competitive dialogue, competitive procedures with negotiation that you have already discussed with Francesco. Today we are going to speak about the innovation partnership, and the next webinar will be on the pre-commercial procurement. And then the innovative approach to financing, so highlighting returns and using it for proposals, combining and bundling with the commercial and financiable sub-project, but also reducing costs and combining sources and forms of innovative financing. So that's the main point for today, and we will go, as I mentioned, to the innovative approach of procurement, and in particular with the one that it's the fourth instrument, which is the Innovation Partnership, and I leave the floor to Francesco Molinari.
Thank you, Beatrice, for your introduction. I hope you can hear me fine. I'm now starting to share my screen with the presentation of today. Now you should see my screen. I hope you see the slides scrolling down and up. So I'm ready to start. As you said, Beatrice, today is the day of the Innovation Partnership. This is the fourth in a series of webinars. The previous topics have been the preliminary market consultation, not properly an instrument for procurement, but a preparatory instrument, the competitive dialogue, and the competitive procedure with negotiation. These three instruments will be mentioned again during my presentation, but let me start by saying as a main message that the Innovation Partnership shifts the focus which was common to the previous instruments, especially competitive dialogue and competitive procedure for with negotiation, going away from solutions that are already in the state of the art and towards the financing through procurement of research and innovation activities, leading to the delivery of prototypes of goods, services, works, which are not yet in the state of the art in the moment when the Innovation Partnership procedure is started. So the goals for today, like in the previous three workshops, webinars, are to narrow the focus on the instrument, specifically reflect on some pros and cons with reference to a special category of possibly procured goods, services, and works, which we collectively name nature-based solutions, also providing some examples taken from real procedures, and finally, ignite a discussion among the participants. I know some of you in the room, I know you have also direct experiences on the specific instrument of the Innovation Partnership, so I really look forward to discussing the pros and cons and your own experiences during the last part, as Beatrice announced, of today's webinar, which is going to last until 10:30, basically. Having said that, this slide and the following one is quite familiar because it is common to all the webinars, so I will rush into it. It is basically about, like a reminder, the complexity and also the wide variety of the typologies of nature-based solutions. I will be back on this later. Here, compared with the previous webinars, the focus should be a bit less on the variety, which of course persists in our context, and a bit more on the innovative nature of solutions which are not yet deployed anywhere when the procurement procedure starts. The reason for this webinar series is connected with the structure of the URBREATH project, which Beatrice presented before, having a group of so-called front-runner cities and a group of so-called follower cities, with the idea of transferring whatever can be transferred in terms of knowledge, experience, including on public procurement and especially public procurement of innovation, PPI, the common umbrella which gathers all the typologies of instruments which we are presenting in this webinar series. The concept of adaptation or transfer is our reference for this webinar series. We are trying to explore what is indeed replicable and what can be learned positively from the experience of our predecessors. So now let's go to the first part of this presentation, which is about a description of what the innovation partnership is about. Let me mention that the term innovation partnership is unfortunately a bit abused. There is a trend of European policy making named European Innovation Partnership, which is completely out of the scope of our discussion, but still I will mention that again during my presentation. The innovation partnership we are talking about is one of the instruments for public procurement regulated in the directive number 24 of the year 2014, Article 31, and of course in all the national legislations of the member states which have adopted the provisions of that directive. It is, like I said, a combination of procurement and research and innovation activities. Even more, it is a way to procure research and innovation services which may lead to the prototyping, testing, and successful deployment of goods, services, and works of any kind, and specifically for what is of interest in our domain, in our project, nature-based solutions. The process of innovation partnership is structured and stepwise, culminating in a final step where there can be or not a final purchase of the solution that has been developed across time, across the procedure. And the reason for making purchase optional is exactly that the procedure cannot promise to lend into the formation of something that has the nature of a fully developed product, because the starting point is exactly something that doesn't exist yet or is insufficiently described in the state of the art. So let's understand the difference between what we have presented in the previous two webinars, at least, the competitive dialogue and the competitive procedure with negotiation, and the innovation partnership. But I can anticipate to you that next week, during the last webinar of this series, speaking about pre-commercial procurement, I will reuse this slide because it is the same discourse, and PCP belongs to the same family of the innovation partnership. As you may remember, for those of you who were in the previous webinars, CD and CPN have the aim to choose among existing solutions, which are probably too complex or too difficult to specify in detail. Remember, especially in the competitive dialogue, the interplay between the dialogue with the suppliers and the list of specifications which can be updated and improved and refined as a result of that discussion, of that dialogue, or in the context of the competitive procedure with negotiation, during the stepwise, again, process of submitting and negotiating technical offers coming from the shortlisted suppliers, there is still the possibility to feed back into the initial set of specifications, with the only exceptions of the minimum requirements and the award criteria for the tender in operation. Here we are in a different scenario. The solutions we are aiming at are new, not only, or at least new for the buyer, which is the situation where, for example, in an experience of innovation partnership that I know is familiar to some of you, was exactly the starting point. Something was known but never deployed before at the site of the buyer. Or it can be even better from one point of view, at least, the solutions we are looking for do not exist at all. So they are new to the market. There may be known by some research institution, there can be some initial prototyping efforts or proofs of concept, but nothing that can be compared with the level of maturity of the solutions which stay on the left-hand side of this slide. Going even deeper, the instruments we presented in the past two webinars aim at buying off-the-shelf solutions which are complex by definition. They can be pre-designed MBS packages with well or sufficiently well-defined specifications. Procurement focuses on selecting, optimizing, and negotiating the best available solution or solutions, because it can also be the case that more than one winner is awarded to supply the solution to the buyer. The other two instruments, on the other hand, they deal with novel or experimental solutions requiring prototyping and iterative testing before being finalized. The structure itself of the innovation partnership and, as we will see, of pre-commercial procurement is such that it keeps the research and innovation phases separate from the optional purchase, which in the case of pre-commercial procurement is forbidden, not even optional, completely out of the scope of the procedure. I have done little research. I don't want to go into the details. The slide will be available after the webinar. But these are examples of possible solutions that exist in the state of the art, still, because of their complexity, can be further refined by using either of the two instruments we discussed previously. The example of green walls was indeed in one of the cases that we presented, but as you can see, there can be others, making reference to the picture I presented in the beginning of my presentation today. All the variety I was mentioning in nature-based solutions is reflected in this slide, and the procurement objectives, as you can see in the last column on the right-hand side, can be various and different. For example, going to the need to specify what is the unit cost and other delivery conditions and maintenance conditions, to the broader need to optimize what already exists, to fine-tune, to customize. You see, but we are still speaking of something that already exists and at least in broad terms can be specified from the technical point of view. On the other hand, for the other two instruments, and especially for today's innovation partnership, this example, also with a bit of creativity and fantasy, if you allow me, are innovative, are really out of the ordinary to some extent. There is a trial of fungal mycelium mats, which is particularly esoteric, even in the description. There are 3D printed reef modules. There are experimental combinations of substances to boost carbon sequestration rates in plants. There are innovative structures integrating sensors and other materials. And here, as you can see, the procurement objectives can range from the assessment of the performance of alternative ways of setting up these solutions to defining feasibility studies, pilot installations, validate the initial results of deployment. It is not at all mandated to finalize with a purchase, although this can be one of the possible outcomes. How does all this work? The picture on the left-hand side only refers to the first 4 stages, and it is quite similar to the way competitive dialogue and competitive procedure with negotiation also work. There is an initial call publishing the minimum requirements and the selection criteria, then candidatures are presented. Candidates are shortlisted using objective criteria, although we can add here to stage 2 that the objective criteria may be a bit more loose, so to speak, because we are in the domain of research and innovation, and also to the purpose of having startups and micro SMEs to join with their ideas if they are suitable, feasible, and interesting enough. I assume that the range of selection and shortlisting criteria may be less restrictive than in the case of the previous instrument. But again, shortlisted candidates will be invited to submit proposals, which will again take some distance from the previous examples because they will be no longer proposals to deploy something, but more reasonably proposals to do research and innovation activities leading to the possible testing and therefore experimental deployment of something. Negotiations can be iterative and lead to a situation where all the bidders are invited to submit the final offer. This is how also the previous instruments work. But there are additional points apart from the award, which follows the principle of MEET, which stands for most economic advantageous tender. The point is that when the implementation of the contract starts, we can have, and normally we should have, multiple suppliers involved. So the awardees might be more than one, probably should be more than one, and their activities can run either in series or in parallel. But in any case, there should be milestones across the timeline of development, allowing the buyer to make a reflection, to sit down, evaluate the interim results, and decide whether all these initial set of awardees should be confirmed, or if some of them should be asked to stop and therefore leave the procedure because of the poor quality of achievements until that time. This is perfectly legal, and although it undoubtedly adds complexity, it is also the source of huge flexibility from the point of view of the buyer waiting for research and innovation to deliver meaningful results to them. So if we want to depict the positioning of the innovation partnership in relation with the familiar procurement cycle, starting with planning and then tendering and then contract implementation, this possibility of revising and shortlisting the bidders despite their having been awarded initially makes it so that the positioning of the innovation partnership goes to the right-hand side, closer to contract implementation, feeding back to tendering, contrary to what was the case for the instruments we evaluated before. If we compare, in particular, this instrument with the preliminary market consultation, we can notice that there is no incompatibility, there is complementarity between the two instruments, especially because the preliminary market consultation, as some of you may remember, has the main purpose of overviewing what already exists in the market, and therefore it can be of immense help for the buyer before starting the tendering phase to decide on the most appropriate instrument to choose. Now it starts becoming clearer that not all the instruments are born equal, not all the instruments serve the same purpose, and the main element of differentiation between instruments pertains exactly to the nature of the solutions. Under other points of view, there are indeed differences above and beyond the fact that PMCs only pertain to the planning phase. They don't have a contractual or even a tendering nature. Innovation partnerships sometimes do not finalize with a purchase, or rarely do so, which is something to be considered, which puts the two instruments a bit closer to one another. There is no shortlisting in the PMC, while there is in the IP, and both procedures have elements in common in terms of respect for what are called the general principles of procurement law, including transparency, inclusiveness, parity of treatment, confidentiality in business. So let's reflect again a bit, and I'm coming to the end of the first part of this presentation. Why is innovation partnership particularly useful when procurement is about nature-based solutions? I identified 4 reasons. The first reason is that this instrument addresses products that are not off the shelf and require new approaches to be delivered, or new approaches to solve known problems in different ways. The second reason is that R&D, which is anyway financed through the innovation partnership can be kept separate from the ultimate goal of buying the results. This because, obviously, research and innovation, you never know in advance how far it can lead us. The prototype may prove inadequate to fulfill the requirements, and this may be nobody's fault, just the unfortunate outcome of very well managed and carried forward research and development activities. The innovation partnership keeps the purchase optional and therefore adds an element of flexibility to this scenario. Third reason, collaboration between buyer and seller is extended also to the implementation phase. On top of collaboration that unavoidably occurs during the negotiation phase, which is a common aspect to all the previous instruments except the preliminary market consultation, there is indeed a strong need for collaboration during the implementation stage, which is phased to facilitate the development of bespoke and context-specific solutions, and to that end requires continuous accompaniment of the suppliers' activities by expert teams appointed by the buyers. And finally, as I already mentioned, it does not incentivize putting too demanding selection criteria when the procurement instrument is launched and we have the necessity of shortlisting the participants. In this case, previous experience, previous contracts, a certain turnover, and other elements which usually accompany the selection of candidates are less relevant. Why? Because we are speaking of something that doesn't exist, and therefore we cannot exclude, we should not exclude the possibility that a completely new company with zero turnover and maybe no particular experience in the domain has at least the idea to develop something which can become really interesting for the purposes of the procedure and therefore for the interests of the buyer. From a historical point of view, the innovation partnership did not exist at the time of the previous directive, the one of 2004, and like I said, in 2010, another usage of the term became widespread, connected with the creation of European alliances among research and innovation stakeholders in specific domains, such as the domain of active and healthy aging, agriculture and forestry, and others. We have to be careful also while doing research on past cases, because this definition of innovation partnership has nothing to do with the topic we are talking about. In 2014, Article 31 introduced the innovation partnership with the specific purpose of allowing the selection of partners, not by chance. The term alludes to collaboration on a competitive basis so that they can develop innovative solutions tailored to the requirements of the buyers, of the contracting authorities. National laws have adopted the IP, which has become widespread in Europe, although a bit like in the case of the competitive procedure with negotiation, there are not very many cases referred to nature-based solutions specifically, which reinforces a comment we were already making last time on whether this is due to the instrument or to the nature of the objects being procured. The nature-based solutions, as we know, have a difficulty in becoming well described by clear and shared specifications. Now I'm starting the quick reading of the article, which I will not do in more than 1 or 2 minutes because of the time issue. The innovation partnership starts, like the previous documents, with a contract notice, where the contracting authority identifies the need, but just the need, for an innovative product, service, or works that exceeds the state of the art, the market state of the art. The contract notice includes the minimum requirements, which are the only part that cannot be modified during the procedure together with the award criteria. Then at least 30 days must be given to economic operators to present their candidatures, only formal candidatures, presenting only administrative information. And the sixth paragraph says that contracting authorities shall in particular apply criteria related to the research and development capacity. So it does not mention turnover or other contracts of the same kind, for the reason that now the focus is on developing new things. However, it is possible to shortlist and invite only a subset of the economic operators who presented candidatures. The maximum number of candidates can be limited in writing, and it is also possible to carry it forward with one single partner, provided this is specifically indicated in the contract notice. Then there is the negotiation. The negotiation is based on the presentation of the reiterated presentation of a collection of tenders. Negotiations are bilateral, without any disclosure to the other participants, and they can be done in a stepwise fashion or just allowing a single opportunity to revise the initially submitted tender. During the negotiations, equal treatment must be ensured, no discrimination, business confidentiality, and so on. The innovation partnership is launched when it is awarded, so the activities of research and innovation can start, and these activities should be structured, must be structured in successive phases following the sequence of the research and innovation process. So, for example, the prototyping followed by the validation and testing, followed by the creation of an initially defined product. The stepwise structure, as I mentioned, is also useful for the contracting authority to decide whether to discontinue, to terminate the partnership after the end of each phase based on received results. There must be rules and provisions for intellectual property rights, and there is this clause which is a bit unusual, the structure of the partnership, number 7, and in particular, the duration and the value of the different phases should reflect the degree of innovation of the proposed solution and the sequence of the research and innovation activities. In other words, the budget of your call for tender should be well distributed across the phases. It cannot be that we are forcing the participants to co-finance by their own pocket money the development of certain results. This is another element of distinction between the innovation partnership and the instrument of pre-commercial procurement, which I will present to you next Monday. The estimated value of supplies, services, or works shall not be disproportionate in relation to the investment required for their development. There is no sharing of costs between the buyers and the providers. This is an image which summarizes the process. I will not stay on this slide, but it is simply a replica of what I've been reading and mentioning before. Now let's go to this point, which is practically speaking the start of the second part of today's webinar, a summary list of pros and cons, benefits and risks, which we might want to take into account during our dialogue, hopefully, in the second part of today's webinar. The pros are that the instrument is suitable for R&D projects dealing with solutions that are not in the state of the art. It enhances the capacity to deploy site-specific solutions which can be tailored during implementation. It is more open to small-sized micro SMEs, startups, and emergent solution providers. There is the possibility to stop the process without landing into an obligatory purchase, and transparency, which doesn't mean disclosure of details during the negotiation process, is the best source of accountability for the procurer at all times. The risks are also there. It is time demanding and resource intensive, requires strong governance capacity and also technical expertise in R&D and innovation within the buyer's teams. There is the risk that it ends up into insignificant or useless results. It can generate tensions between the obligation to transparency and the obligation to protect confidentiality, and can pose legal challenges at all stages, including during implementation, for example, due to the decision to stop the procedure before its natural end. I have a couple of examples to share. These are not strictly connected with nature-based solutions, although they are both designed in a way that includes or may include the use of elements that become part of urban environment. This first example comes from the city of Fredericksburg, which is affected by recurrent floods, as you can see from the pictures on the top of this slide. And therefore, a few years ago, we are speaking of 2017, 2018, they were choosing looking for innovative solutions to improve the functioning of the water management system, especially handling rainwater and at the same time watering trees and all other elements of urban greening environments. The solution did not exist at the time the IP was launched. The solution can be seen in the pictures, in the drawing and the picture of the construction site. The call included only functional requirements. There was complete openness to the technical specifications. So whatever solution that could work, at least in principle, might have financed. The functional requirements were about a minimum capacity to capture water per meter of road, to remove water from the roads in a certain period of time, and the direct connection with the tree watering system. The solution was implemented as a prototype in an existing road structure, which you can see in the photographs. So it was developed and implemented as a prototype without any obligation to adopt it in case it was really working well. The whole procedure unfolded over approximately 18 months and practically led to the reconfiguration of the street, which you can see in the bottom part of this slide. The other example comes from the city of Amsterdam. An innovation partnership was launched again in 2017 with the aim of simplifying and making more cost-effective the process of repairing and or renovating the canals, the walls protecting the streets from the, I can imagine the flooding of the canals. Traditional construction methods required the use of temporary work platforms and the removal of existing structures prior to the construction of a new wall. So the process was time-consuming, costly, and impactful on the residents, which may have concerns on the safety for them, for those living right in front of the canal. The pilot work was localized again on a small trait of 200 meters and finalized in March 2024. Here the news is that the system worked so well that it led to the signature of additional contract orders for an extension of 1.3 kilometers, which were signed in the same year, December last year, and therefore are now ongoing as activities. So we can say that thanks to this instrument, the city of Amsterdam identified a cost-effective, and I cannot go into the details, but more reliable system to do the maintenance, the walls of the quays that exist in all the canals. This is the end of the first part of my presentation, so if there are any questions, I will be happy to answer them. And I will temporarily stop sharing my screen. As usual, you can use the chat box and open your microphone for any other question. Thank you.
So thank you, Francesco, for your contribution. I think it's very, very interesting. And also I think that there are some, so also the examples are very interesting, considering that we have some similar scenarios that the cities have identified, specifically in the Atlantic area. And so you are mentioning Denmark and the Netherlands. And I think that the kind of solutions that have been adopted, considering the innovation partnership, are very interesting also for the cities that are in this project, such as Leuven and Aarhus. And I would like to ask if they are in the conversation and if they are in the webinar, because I didn't check, but I think maybe there will be 11. But if they have something similar, or if they have adopted something similar, or they have kind of prototyping, or they have thought about how to prototype some kind of experience like the one that you mentioned. They are no more in the conversation, so it's fine.
Okay, if there are no questions, I can share the last slide, which is or is supposed to be Max, please.
Sorry, Francesco, I have a question. Probably I missed some part, but I would like to know if there's some relationship in between the supplier of the preliminary consultation and the suppliers in the innovative partnership. I mean, it could be the same person, because I imagine that in the first case you, let's say, in some case monitorize the offer in the market. Then in some cases, same companies or suppliers could present in the second part. It is possible.
Thanks for the question. It's very interesting because it reopens a discourse I started at the time, and I can resume now. The best possible answer is I don't know, we don't know, but I would bet it could be a no more than a yes, for the following reason. That when we do as prospective buyers a preliminary market consultation, we really don't have any idea of the kind of instrument which will be selected for the procurement procedure. We don't have idea because we don't even know the solutions we are looking for. We have a generic need or requirement which can be generic from the point of view of the technical specifications. So we don't know exactly what we want. If we had to procure personal computers, we would be facilitated by the existence of standardized specifications for personal computers. But in the case of nature-based solutions, we don't even have the possibility of finding a database of specifications. So we only have the need, in the case I presented of the city of Amsterdam, we have the need of overcoming a cost-ineffective and inefficient procedure for the maintenance of canals. But it is something that at the time a preliminary market consultation is launched, can be kept at this level of generic awareness. Then, thanks to the consultation, thanks to economic operators joining the discussion, sending the presentations of what they do, the business they run, the solutions they can possibly deliver, the organizers of the preliminary market consultation can come to a conclusion. This solution already exists in the state of the art, or it doesn't. With the interim situation that it exists, but it has never been deployed as such in the context of the prospective buyer's location. So at this stage, the decision is taken. And the decision can also be, after the closure of a preliminary market consultation, not to run a procurement at all, because the organizers are not convinced. Or it can be the choice of any of the instruments that I've been presenting, and the direction of the procurement. So what we ultimately want to buy can be modified freely because there is no obligation, quite the opposite. There is the obligation not to disclose during a preliminary market consultation what the contents and the orientation of the future call for tender would be about. So practically speaking, the chances that an operator who joined the preliminary market consultation is also invited, or in the first stage, candidates to become an invited bidder. I don't know how to quantify them. It can happen or maybe not, but it depends on too many factors. We cannot predict when we are running the preliminary market consultation. Also because there is no obligation time-wise either. So it's not that you are mandated to run the preliminary market consultation and then after 3 months or 6 months, you are forced to do the real call for tender. You can also change your mind and do nothing, and there is no obligation there.
It was clear. Thank you.
You're welcome. So if there are no further questions, my proposal is to share the last slide I have for you, which is the one with the aggressive character, asking for your opinions. Basically, today I tried to argue that the innovation partnership can be beneficial or very beneficial in the local adaptation of nature-based solutions, in the tailoring of initial concepts or prototypes to the specific situation of cities. I have also presented a slide with the pros and cons, which is open to comments. And I know that some of you have experience in the partnership, in the innovation partnership. So if you have any comment coming from that experience to share with us, it would be helpful to confirm that you are more or less convinced of the usefulness of this instrument, also thanks to what we have been saying and what you have been listening to during this webinar. So I don't know if anyone would like to break the ice here. Maybe I could go back to the pros and cons.
Yeah, I was asking that, so maybe we can start with the pros and cons. So maybe you can also discuss with us if you consider that the benefits or the risks, so the pros and cons are those, or if you have mapped some of the others. So maybe we can start with this kind of conversation, because I think that there are some still pros and cons depending also on your processes. So we have discussed this also during a previous meeting, but also the previous webinars. So I think that maybe you are more familiar with one specific procedure instead of this one, but I think that there are some kind of pros and cons that you can identify. Yes, Max.
Yes, I have some comment or let's say question. Maybe it is not easy to answer, but I think that one of the critical point, as was pointed here in the cons, it is the, let's say, measurement of the final results. Because if you start with a, let's say, process which is, as you mentioned before, a research and development process, the evaluation of the achievement or not achievement of the final result could be quite critical, right?
Yes, it can be critical, but in any case, it is not an arbitrary outcome. It is something that should be provided for in the rules of the game, in the tender documentation. So the two cases I presented before, the Frederiksberg city doing the installation and the Amsterdam city doing the installation and then expanding with additional resources the scope of the initial prototype to a broader area. They are there to document the two possible outcomes, none of which has, to my knowledge, created a litigation in front of a court, because the two options were mentioned in the tender documentation as possibilities. Again, not subject to the arbitrary decision of the buyer, but subject to the outcomes of a verification, which is routine in every procurement, including procurement of non-innovative material. Think of the procurement of computers. It is obviously the case that the buyer would not pay if the delivery is done with differences from what was procured, or if the computers are damaged, and any other possibility. This is something that only has to be mentioned in the tender documentation and then transferred into the contract, which is obligatory to sign between the buyer and each of the providers involved in the process, which can only be one or maybe more than one, depending on circumstances. So I do not see this as a particular source of complications, but it is true that also if we look in perspective at the different instruments which we have been presenting across time, we are clearly going from the easiest to the most complex. And the most complex will not even be this one, but next week we will speak about the pre-commercial procurement instrument, which has additional elements of complexity to be added to the procedure. Therefore, one of the points of discussion may also be related to this dilemma between investing capacity, human resources, from the buyer's point of view, in procedures that become more and more complex, against the possibility of getting in return a solution or a collection of solutions, or maybe just a prototype that has the potential of being of high interest for the buyer, like in the case of Amsterdam, because it is so tailored to the specificities of the area of installation of the original prototype that it can be considered unique, and therefore coming to the commercial phase, the value for money principle can be maximized by this approach. While on the other hand, if For example, in the Amsterdam case, there was no positive outcome from the experimentation. The two parties would have been happy to finalize the relationship, the business relationship, without pushing it forward, because neither of the two parties, seated in front of something that doesn't work, would have anything to object to the fact that, okay, we tried, this is a prototype that can be adapted in the future, but practically speaking, it doesn't give us sufficient reliability to be deployed at scale.
I just have a kind of like reflection because when I was reading the benefits and the risks, the possibility to stop the process, it's kind of tricky in my opinion, because if you can stop the process, then you have already spent some time and resources, which is it is a risk. But also from the point of view of the governance and the kind of organization, so the capacity to integrate technical expertise. So I think that maybe, but that's a question also to you. So the possibility to stop the process could also be considered as a risk, because if it's finished, so when you said in the case of Denmark, so it's a kind of process that do not end in something, so in a prototype that it's not adequate, but they have spent like time, resources. So from the point of view of the effort, and also from the point of view of the organization and the governance, it's very, time consuming, but also, very, let's say, intensive from different point of view. So can we consider also the possibility to stop the process as a kind of not risk, but maybe some kind of a threat?
Let me go back to the example of especially Frederiksberg, which is evident, at least from the pictures, that it was about digging a hole in the street, and putting a very cumbersome system below ground level, covering it with then, as you have seen, like a small garden they built on top. Where could the process be stopped? For sure, it could be stopped if the technical specifications that must be co-created, collaboration, as I mentioned in another slide, is an integral part of the process. In the case of innovation partnership, it's not like waiting for the delivery of the computers. It's like jointly identifying the site where to dig the hole, analyzing the characteristics, I can imagine, of the typology of soil and underground material. So it's a number of constraints which you can probably never enumerate in full unless you are forced to do that, because you have to dig a hole and you have to find an area where to dig that hole. So the first part of my answer is to say that this instrument is not for all purposes. If we have some kind of standardization in the solutions we are looking for, last time there was the city of Turin commissioning green walls, one as an indoor and another one as an outdoor installation. There was some innovation there, alternative options were examined, but at the end of the day, it was like a green wall in a room and a green wall outside the building. So easy to install. Here, no, we have to dig the hole and we have to test the functioning for real to be sure that it may ultimately work. So there are indeed risks that when you go and evaluate the final prototype, you realize it can never work because of the characteristics of the ground, because of any technical part. So in principle, you might stop the process there. Or you might do the installation. And for sure, before buying, you will have to monitor, you will have to measure, you will have to get feedback whether the system works fine in both situations mentioned in the call. No? On the one hand, as a way to protect against the consequences of flooding. On the other hand, in the routine functioning, it was also something to continuously water the trees and the plants. So there were two probably contrasting goals which had to be put together, and only by measuring in the good times and in the bad times the functioning of that system, you can possibly get the information on whether it is fitting or not fitting, which is another milestone where you can decide to continue with further installations. The law speaks of additional experimental series. So I don't know the details of the call, but the city of Frederiksberg might have had some spare budget to include only under the condition that the pilot in question, the hole dug, was successful. I don't know if they did it afterwards. For sure, the city of Amsterdam did it. So it was again regulated, not arbitrary. And regulated means that the risks of litigation are not very high. On the other hand, the risks inherent with the research and innovation are there, cannot be removed. But the examples show you that there are solutions that cannot be taken from the shelf, like buying a computer. In both cases, the need to experiment, test, validate, do trials and errors, monitor, evaluate, those needs make the solution too immature to be bought as a product, and they confine the solution to the range of innovative solution, which can be of benefit from the buyer itself, but also of benefit from the point of view of the provider for additional buyers in the future. This is something I will talk about next time, because it is based on this argument that the pre-commercial procurement improves over the logic behind the innovation partnership, saying, guys, let's be honest, we have a mutual interest, not only in the successful outcome of the pilot financed by the procurement instrument. We also have a mutual interest in building something that doesn't exist today, but tomorrow it can be so good that others may want to buy it. This creates a situation where it's no longer acceptable, and I'm coming back to your question, Beatrice, it's no longer acceptable that the city bears all the risks and pays in full for a solution that can be in the future reused by the provider in other situations without being remunerated, rewarded for this indirect benefit that the procurement procedure is creating to the business of the winning company or innovator. So the pre-commercial procurement is a step forward because it starts saying, let's share the risks and let's also share the benefits between the two parties in a way that cannot be regulated. And in fact, the news is that with the innovation partnership, we are finalizing the instruments which are regulated in the directive. Pre-commercial procurement, we will talk about next time, is mentioned, but is not regulated by the directive because it has this nature of sort of negotiated agreement between two parties who share a vested interest in making innovation have further progress and reach more ambitious goals, not only for themselves, but also for additional exploitation opportunities, which are also present here, but here they are a bit bound by the rules. So remember the paragraph number 7 I read before of Article 31 saying, okay, but we must pay for this innovation in full. There can be no discounts of the market price of the innovations we are commissioning so that they are developed. If there is discount, this means that the risks are being shared. So it's no longer an innovation partnership, it is another instrument.
So we are getting towards the ends of our webinar, and I think that this procedure is very interesting. And I have also other questions, but maybe I can follow the next one because you already anticipate something, so you make curiosity, and so I will definitely follow the next webinar. And do you want to add more? Otherwise, I will just say when this webinar will be. So, okay, that was the fourth webinar of the series of 5. So the last one and the last session will be next Monday, the 27th of October, from 9 to 10:30 chess time. And the topic will be, as already anticipated by Francesco, it will be about the pre-commercial procurement. And I think we can close here the session, and I hope that you can join the next session, and also that you are able to see and to watch this webinar because we are going to publish them online. And let's say looking forward to see you the next time. So thank you very much to Francesco and to all that have participated, and see you next week.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much
Bye-bye.
to everyone. Bye.
Mhm.